Salam and Ramadan Mubarak. Welcome back to our Dispatches Weekly program where we discuss Somalia's latest news. My name is Abdul Qadir Guleid. This week we're discussing the mass arrests of journalists in Hargeisa, Somaliland police chief allegedly threatening MP Mohamed Abib. Somaliland journalists faced a volatile situation this week as the country's ruling party Kulmiye implemented mass arrests on reporters covering riots at Hargeisa's main jail, while the prominent young MP Mohamed Abib told reporters in Hargeisa that the country's chief of police leveled unspecified personal threats against him. To discuss those items, we're joined by Guleid Jama, a renowned human rights lawyer in Hargeisa. Salam and Ramadan Mubarak, Guleid Ahmed Jama, for joining us again. If you could start us off by addressing the major issue in Somaliland this week, which was the mass arrests of journalists during their working hours. If you could tell us what the Constitution says about arresting journalists, it would be great.
Thank you. To start with, Somaliland is a result of a long struggle against a dictatorship. The main tenets of Somaliland, which this constitution is based on, is freedom of expression, freedom of media, and democratic principles. And in Article 32 of the Constitution, freedom of media is particularly guaranteed by the Constitution. Their work should not be subjugated in any form or in any way. Therefore, the detention of the journalists is clearly against the Constitution. Also, it is contrary to international human rights standards. Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights all guarantee basic fundamental rights and freedom for press and other forms of media.
Right. The government is alleging that the journalists actually were reporting on classified information. You would think with astute journalists from the VOA and the BBC Somali services both would know better than to do that. What is the government really relying on arresting reporters like this?
I believe nothing is classified about the prison. Prison is a place that holds convicts and people remanded to that. And they were not inside the prison, but outside the prison, reporting about incident that took place inside the prison. Therefore, there's nothing classified. There's nothing separate about that. Secondly, the journalists were arrested on the scene by, as we know, police officers and intelligence officers. Therefore, there was no due process of law if they have violated any law or any ethical or professional principles. Therefore, it was very wrong detention, and I think there is no lawyer in this part of the world can legally justify such massive arrests of journalists doing their work about the incident, a newsworthy incident that took place in the heart of the city. For the people who don't know Hargeisa prison, it is located literally the center of Hargeisa, facing the place where Somaliland was declared in 1960 when it gained the independence, so where the flag was raised. I don't think the argument of the government is anyway right.
Right. If we may continue with that line of inquiry regarding the prison riots and subsequent arrests of reporters, since there's no legal footing or basis for the arrests, what are the other reasons floated perhaps by the opposition and the public in terms of the real reasons for these mass arrests of journalists?
I think this is not unprecedented. I think in the last 10 years, every year, human rights organizations report detention of journalists, prosecution of journalists, and shutting down of media houses. The majority of media houses in Somaliland have been suspending temporarily or some of them indefinitely. Therefore, crackdown of independent, privately owned media is something very common in Somaliland. And I see the incident that took place in 13th April this year as continuation of government's persecution of private media. And that has to stop, because if Somaliland is democracy, and I believe it is democracy, and that is what the people of Somaliland opted in a constitution, they have overwhelmingly assented. The government should allow media and other critical voices to raise their opinion. It is not only media analysis. We witnessed it last week. For instance, a lady who reported about corruption, a street vendor who reported about corruption, being arrested for simply saying that. Therefore, it is not unprecedented, and I think something is very wrong.
Right. There's also been reports where masked, authority figures arresting journalists off the street and actually demonstrating vile and reprehensible actions against journalists and civilians. But to move forward a bit, Representative Mohamed Abib from Audal seemed rattled by an encounter he reportedly had with Police Chief Dabagale. What's going on there?
I think that was very strange encounter, and eyewitnesses also agreed with MP's claim that the police commissioner has threatened him, and within the parameters, the component of the criminal investigation department. And I think that's a very serious issue. The police commissioner is legally responsible to protect the law and peace, to prevent violence. It is not expected from police commissioner to threaten violence. That is, again, it's what he's being trained, if he's trained in the police. But at least what is being said by the law of Somaliland, police commissioner should not do. Therefore, it is a very alarming, very concerning issue. Members of parliament has also stood by with MP Mohamed on condemning that. And I believe the police commissioner should apologize to the member of parliament and to the people of Somaliland and stop anything that might threaten anyone, whether it's politician or not. His job is not to threaten. He's a law enforcement officer, and I think we should keep that in mind.
Right. Other MPs actually came forward saying they've also heard threats emanating from the chief of police. Well, that is troublesome. Some are saying and are speculating that the media and the House of Representatives seems to be the only ones currently standing up to the government and actually questioning them and holding their feet to the fire. Is there something to that? Because as we know, the opposition parties have been deafeningly quiet about what's going on in Somaliland currently.
The human organizations, local and international, have been saying in the last number of years that cracking against critical voices is increasing Somaliland, alarmingly increasing Somaliland. And the new MPs, some of them, MP Mohamed Abib included, have been raising their voice on issues, including media crackdown, but also other matters. If we remind the public, the audience, MP Mohamed was also very critical on corruption issues. He's the deputy chair of the Public Accounting Committee. It's a committee that is responsible to oversee and supervise government's accounts and finances. And he was very critical about that. And he raised a number of allegations of corruption or fraud or mismanagement of the public funds. Therefore, of course, he has enemies in the government because of what he says and the kind of job he's doing. And as you said, at this when MP came public today, said he was also threatened by the same police commissioner. I have been in human rights in over a decade and seen many bad actions from government officials. But as far as I remember, I have never seen or heard a police commissioner himself threatening people or taking action against them, and that raises very serious concern. I don't think that thing should be taken lightly. I think it should be taken very seriously, and it might be a beginning of something that might come in the near future.
Right. Others are also flagging the fact that General Tabagale is part and parcel of the militarization of the police services in Somaliland, which could cause some serious problems. Obviously, and finally, all of this is coming at a time when the country's president, Mohamed Abib, recently visited and came back from the US, reportedly to sell the government or the country's democratic achievements. What sort of a democratic picture does the government actions this week paint in terms of Somaliland being a beacon of democracy?
Yes, the president has emphasized that Somaliland and the US have shared value of democracy and freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And I wonder if this shared value includes massive detention of dozens of journalists, including a leading and prominent and respected really journalists. We're not talking about tabloid journalists. We are talking established journalists whom people respect their work, have been in the field in many years. Therefore, clearly these actions contradict the statements of the president and his other ministers in the US. And I don't understand if there is a thinking in Somaliland that the world is not aware of what's going on in Somaliland, or whether they have changed their mind. I don't really understand. I don't really see the rationale of what is going on here. But what I can say is that the government really should reassess its actions. I think it should sit down, respect the constitution. People will say something bad against them. That's the bane of democracy. If you are in a democracy, if you are in a public office, people will be condemning you. They will be criticizing you, fairly or unfairly. It's not always fairly. But if you don't want that, the best option is to leave office and become a private citizen. And I guarantee no one will criticize you. But if you hold a public office, people will be criticizing you, and you have to be patient about that. And I have been many years advocate for police reform. The police of Somaliland needs to be reformed, drastic reform, and all the action is taking place now. Prove the urgent need to reform the police of Somaliland. And going back to a statement you said in one of your questions about the opposition parties who are silent about these issues, and that is a concern itself. I don't know whether they are afraid of repercussions or whether they are happy with what is going on. If the plan is to continue this persecution of the becoming power, I don't understand. But I think they will become complicit of what is happening unless they take a fair stance that supports freedom of expression and democratic values.
Guleid Jama, always a pleasure to talk to you about these and other issues, and it's fascinating insight that you have in the going on in terms of human rights and the constitutional issues in Somaliland. I really appreciate it, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me and giving the audience and talking about this important topic.
You're very welcome.